Hi everyone, and welcome to this fourth and final week of our course. For this last week, we're talking about communicating information about your programs. We can do everything right when it comes to planning and leading programs, but ultimately, if we're not communicating about them, then we're missing a pretty essential step in the process. And when we think about communicating, this can range from who specifically were you're communicating with and how you're sharing information to them, to also pacing the information that you are communicating. So as you identify new goals or test programs or make adjustments, you'll need to communicate about them. So we're going to talk about some strategies for that today. Communicating with colleagues, stakeholders, and community members is never ending. We're always going to be doing it. So as you move your programming forward, you want to make sure that you're communicating regularly and often. So the average person needs to hear something 7 times in a variety of ways before they really internalize the message. So just kind of take that in and think about how often you communicate about something and how many times you do it. It's probably not 7 because that means that sharing information at a meeting isn't enough. Doing one Facebook post isn't enough. Sending one email isn't enough. Those are all great things, and most people will need to hear that information 4 more times before they really keep it in their head and understand and are able to share what you've told them. So this means we have to share information a lot and also in different ways. So common ways that we often share information with folks. Email is probably a big one for many of us. Maybe you're also sharing things in a meeting, or you have some sort of staff newsletter or, wiki or communication strategy online. I don't know. We have like a SharePoint site, and we have a communications hub where we can post communication information. Maybe you're asking other people to communicate on your behalf. All of those are really good options for communication, as are things like social media or using flyers or posting things on community calendars. Those are great ways to communicate with our patrons and our stakeholders. So think about the ways that your organization communicates. What are the places that you're already using those? And then also think about, are there existing channels that you haven't used that you could? Something else that can be really helpful is to try asking colleagues for their suggestions. So if you're not really sure the best ways to get information to people, ask, how do they like to receive information? How do they tend to share information? It's not just your responsibility to come up with every single communication strategy possible on your own. Definitely reach out to get ideas from others to think about what are all the different ways that you can convey information to people. Now, you also want to be proactive about your communication because it's going to prepare you to be thoughtful and intentional rather than last minute or even a reaction to people saying, well, I didn't know that. What else do I need to know? Or, oh, in the moment I'm talking to this patron and I don't know. Can you tell me the information about this program? People generally don't like to feel like they're the last to know, so being proactive is also going to make people feel more comfortable with the information and have some time to think on it before they have to share it out potentially with somebody else. So one way to be proactive is filling out a simple project communication plan, which looks like this, and there's a template in the resources section in our course website. It's really just a high-level overview. So it's asking you to think broadly about who are you communicating with, what do they need to know, when, what are the things or what are the ways that you are going to deliver that communication to them, and then if you have any feedback that you need to get from them, a place to note that. It's really a helpful way to serve as a reminder, especially if you need to communicate with multiple different stakeholder groups like staff, patrons, library board, stuff like that. Because when we're knee deep in our work, I think we all know that having a plan or some date reminders that we've set for ourselves ahead of time can be very, very useful to stay on track. And as you're thinking about something like this communication plan, remember that not everybody needs every single detail. So you can be thoughtful and strategic about what you're communicating. So think the information that you're communicating to your director is going to be really different than what you're sharing with your patrons, right? So there's some kind of targeted information that we're going to want to make sure those different groups know. So give thought to who needs to know what, and that's going to help you share appropriate messages and make sure people are getting the information they need. All right, we're going to take a brain break kind of early here. So give yourself a little time to shake your arms and legs for 15 seconds, pause the video, and come back when you are ready to keep going. All right, so another helpful tool for identifying what to communicate is a simple document called Communicating Change. And we have a template of that again in our course website. But this document basically prompts you to answer a series of questions to ensure that all the communication bases are covered as you're conveying information to someone. So it's going to ask you, who's your audience? What's changing for that audience? Why is this changing? A lot of times we leave out the why in messaging, but that can actually be a very, very helpful way to get people to understand there's intentional reasons behind this. And when people understand why something is happening, they tend to be able to either get on board or at least, kind of respect what the change is or what the adjustment is, even if maybe they don't agree with it. So that why piece is pretty key. You also want to make sure they know what they need to know or learn and where they can get this information. This, in my perspective, is especially useful for staff who are participating in the program somehow or who you're relying on to promote or to talk to folks about it. You also want to make sure people know if they need to do something differently. If there's a different expectation of their work, make sure that's really clear to them. You want to help them understand where they can get help if they need it, and then also how will they know they're successful. So gathering thoughts and being thorough about these questions helps you make sure that you're sharing holistic information. And these don't have to be really complicated or long answers. Sometimes they're going to be very, very simple. Sometimes they might have a little bit more content, but it's just a way to check off to make sure you're not missing something important as you're communicating out. Because it can be so hard when we're in the middle of things to step away and look at it from a perspective of somebody who's not as deeply involved and think, okay, what does that person really need to know that I don't want to forget to tell them? All right, so here's a lot of things to ask. And admittedly, that can sometimes be exhausting and it might feel like you're repeating yourself too much. But just remember, over communicating is better than under communicating. And honestly, in a perfect world, people might actually be tired of your message because they already understand it so well. And if you've done that, that's a good thing. Finally, just know that no matter what you do and how many times you do it, there are people who are going to be unhappy with what you're saying, or they don't even pay any attention and they have no clue what you're talking about. This is frustrating, and you can only control what you communicate, not whether people listen. So if you're running into situations where you are trying your hardest and people just are not getting it, don't be disheartened. Remember that you're doing all you can and that you want to focus on the overall positives and continue sticking to your plan. So keep that in mind if things are feeling frustrating. So when we are giving people program info, sometimes it's quick and easy and we can share it all at once. Maybe one of your programs is switching to a different day or a different time. People will probably still need to hear this multiple times, but it's a straightforward message that they can take in and internalize pretty easily. Other times, you might have more to share or more that you're trying to accomplish. And in those cases, incremental adjustment and incremental change about that adjustment is likely going to be more successful. So, for example, I am really hoping to make some pretty significant changes to the structure of our summer reading program. And I could do all of that at once and put it out to our staff and say, this is totally new. Here's all the things that you need to know about it. But rather than do that, I'm going to divide the changes into a couple of years. And this means staff will have time to learn and get used to a new framework in a period of time where they can really take that in and then be able to better share it with participants. Often I have found in my experience that when there's too much information and too much change trying to come at people, they tend to just shut down, and then you're not going to get anywhere because you don't have all of those allies and all of those communicators who are with you and ready to help share on your behalf. And that speaks to the fact that people really only have the capacity to adjust to so much at one time. And some people have a higher capacity Some people have a lower capacity. So get a sense of how much people around you can handle and then go from there. And I'm guessing all of us know that people's capacity for change has been really impacted by COVID and by all of the events of the last couple of years. And folks might be burned out or experiencing information overload. So, really pay attention and kind of be in touch with that and use that as an opportunity to navigate what's the change that you really need to communicate, or what are you really trying to accomplish with your programs, and how can you work with others on a timeline that's going to make sure it's successful for everybody. And when you're thinking about some of the bigger pieces, sometimes slow, steady progress over the course of time is more likely to yield positive results. So it's tempting to get it done all at once, but one thing at a time might actually be more likely to make you successful. So instead of trying to build out a big plan for a complete overhaul, if that's what you're hoping for, that's great. But maybe think about how you could break it into some smaller, actionable components and focus on one at a time. So give yourself the freedom to think about different ways that you could implement change. It doesn't always have to be all or nothing. All right. Well, that just about wraps it up. But before we talk about this week's assignments, here's just a parting thought about programming. Maybe you have heard of growth mindset and fixed mindset. Maybe you haven't. But the last piece that I'd like to share is that cultivating a growth mindset can be a huge, huge benefit to being able to move forward with doing our programs more intentionally. So the definition of a growth mindset is that it thrives on challenge and sees failure not as evidence of unintelligence, but as a heartening springboard for growth and for stretching our existing abilities. So basically, it means that if we believe we can learn, change, and improve, we can, in fact, do those things. Conversely, a fixed mindset assumes that our character, intelligence, and creative ability are static givens, which we can't change in any meaningful way. And if we want to be able to create meaningful programs that align with our library's goals and our vision and our values, we have to believe it's possible to create those programs, and it is possible. So I hope that you can all go forth and continue to come up with some amazing, thoughtful, intentional programs for your communities. For this final week, our homework is going to focus on practicing communication strategies. So you are going to identify some programming information you want to communicate. And this could be something you've worked on as part of this course. It could be something totally different that you want to communicate about. Either way, you're going to pick that thing, and then you're going to fill out the communications planning tool and include all the groups you'll need to communicate with. Then you're going to choose one of those groups and complete the communicating change worksheet with that group in mind. And then, like other weeks, our discussion assignment is going to be to write an original post and a response post. So your original post should answer the prompt, what did you learn from filling out the 2 communication tools? And what is one thing you can commit to doing to improve the way that you communicate change? Doesn't have to be a big thing, just one thing that you could commit to doing. And then your second post is going to be to respond to a classmate. So as always, get in touch if you need any help. Thank you so much for all of your time. It's been lovely working with all of you. I'm looking forward to seeing you with this week's discussion posts, and then also just keeping in touch and hearing how things are going, seeing the great work that everybody is doing across the state, across the country. So thanks, everybody. I will see you on the discussion boards. Have a good week.